coming up on TheGospelCast.
This man had to be from God in order to perform these signs. Like, the miracles he performs are not natural, they are supernatural. And it says that he spits on the ground and he makes mud with the saliva, with his own saliva, and he anoints the man's eyes with the mud. And he says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Episode 9. Here we are. I know what you're thinking. Is there going to be another guest? Or is it just me? Well, let me answer that question for you. Sadly, it's just going to be me. A lot of my friends are busy at this time, and I thought, you know what? Let's give it a go, and we're going to have just a one-on-one conversation, me with you guys. And you guys being the audience, but you guys also being the participators. I hope you guys are participating and not just watching and not just listening, but actually taking in the words of the gospel. I think this study has been such a blessing to all of us, has been such a blessing to my co-hosts, to my guests, which, yes, it will not always be me, but once in a while it may just be me because a lot of my friends and a lot of the people I hang out with are not available sometimes, and life can be like that. So sometimes you'll have to be stuck with me, but hopefully that'll be fine for a few episodes in the series. Anyway, so we're going to be right here in John chapter 9. This is a very interesting chapter. We're going to be talking about when Jesus heals a blind man. Guys, in my Bible, that's all chapter 9 is. There's no section. So basically how we're going to go about this is I'm going to go by paragraph instead. So we're going to go by paragraph. So the first paragraph we're going to read is verses 1 all the way to 7, and then we'll talk about it. Without any further ado, let's jump into our Bibles to John chapter 9. Not 1 John, because there's no 1 John chapter 9. Just want to let you know about that. John, the Gospel, chapter 9, starting in verse 1. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is still day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Wow, we just start off right off the bat. So right now we are witnessing Jesus coming onto this man. He passes by this man, and the disciples notice him, and they ask Jesus, who is it that sinned that made this person blind? And this was a conspiracy thinking that because somebody in their generation had sinned, this grave sin in their generation, like passed down, that is why this man has disability. And they did this with everybody. They thought that was why people have disabilities, because they sinned, so God cursed them. That's the simple historic and kind of tradition that they would go off of, is if you had a disability, you possibly did a grave sin to God, against God, and he punished you with this disability. However, notice what Jesus says. Jesus says this. So after the disciples ask him, like, Jesus, did this man do something wrong? Did his parents do something wrong in order for him to be blind? Then Jesus says this, it was not this man or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. So he's not blind of the fact because he got cursed by God. He got punished by God. Actually, John actually mentions this. I don't know how he actually just went over this, but John actually mentions this in just verse 1. How the man is born blind. He was blind from birth. I wonder if that was like a little interview that John had not written in the gospel to give his account. So he's blind from birth. So it says this. Jesus says this. He answers the disciples' question, if he was born blind, did he sin? Did his parents sin? And Jesus is saying how he's born blind so God can be given the glory. He is blind so that way God's miraculous works can work through him. And first I want to say this off the bat. If there's somebody listening or watching this and you have a disability, well, my pastor actually says this way. You don't have a disability. You have a different ability. You see, let's be honest. I think a lot of us judge people with disabilities. We overlook and we minimize the disabled because they don't look like us. They don't talk like us. But they're just as a human being as anyone else. And if I'm talking to a disabled person right now, you are a special gift from God. God created us in his perfect image. Why is there cursings on the planet? Because we broke it. But we are created in God's image no matter what. When God created the world in 6 days, he said it was good. Every time that he created something, he spoke. It was good. It was good. At the end of every day, he would say, it is good. It is good. It is good. But when he creates man, which shows up in Genesis 2, which actually is a step back from Genesis 1 to give a little context of how God created man. God creates man in his own image, but he does it in such a loving way. Remember what I said about how God spoke everything into his existence. You can read that in the first page of your Bible. God spoke everything into existence, but when he created a man, it said that he scooped up the dirt or dust and he formed us. He actually put his fingerprints on our kind. And we're all different, aren't we? I'm not trying to start a debate here, but that's the one thing that I think can kind of push back this evolutionistic theory is that we all came from apes. Well, apes do the same things. They're mammals. Now, yes, we are mammals too, but we are not primates. We are created in the image of God, and each one of us is special. Each one of us is special. You have different gifts and different abilities, different talents, and they can be all used for the glory of God. Even if you have a disability, you are created in the image of God. You don't have a disability, you have a different ability. Because God created each and every boy and girl, man and woman, in the image of God. We are created so lovingly in the image of God. No matter if you are disabled, you are still in the hands of a loving, caring Father and Creator. And as we look at this, Jesus comes to the man. So we're back in the passage, and Jesus is coming to this blind man. And it says that he spits on the ground, and he makes mud with the saliva, with his own saliva, and he anoints the man's eyes with the mud. And he says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he washes off his eyes, and he comes back seeing. He puts his face in that water. He washes off the mud off his eyes, and he can see. He's not blind anymore. And I wonder if he had to be directed, right? It's over there, or he already knew. That's just a little thinking right there. Anyway, and now we're going to get into not chapter, but we're going to get into verse 8 all the way through 12, because this gets good. Verse 8. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, Go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, I don't know. I do not know. Like, literally, the people are coming up to him and saying, who healed you? They're so confused of what just happened. It's like chapter 5, when Jesus is healing the man by the pool of Bethesda on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees and everybody that's around him is like, what? What are you doing? Like he was breaking a rule on the Sabbath, which you couldn't move on the Sabbath. Because, I mean, I would love to walk on Sunday too. I would love to just move for a minute. I don't want to just sit on my butt all day long. However, it is the same reaction that the pool of Bethesda, when the man at the pool of Bethesda, when he gets healed, the people are having that reaction of, what? Who healed you? Aren't you the same man that you were by the pool? And they're doing the same thing with here. Wait, aren't you the same person who was blind, sitting and begging, and now you can see? And they're like, who did this? He's like, Jesus told me to go to the pool, dunk my face in that water, and he told me I would be healed, and I was. And they don't know where he is. So let's continue in verses 13 to 17. Verse 13. They brought him to the Pharisees, the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Oh, right there. The Sabbath, it is also a Sabbath day. So the Pharisees asked him again how he received his sight. He said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was much division among them. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. So Jesus, we pointed that out in verse 14. It says, now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So this also is a Sabbath day that Jesus heals this man. And the Pharisees riled up again. And they are thinking again that Jesus, this man that they are chasing after, they are hearing all about, they have a death wish to Jesus saying this man is not keeping the Sabbath. But then others actually have some logic. How can a sinner do such signs? This man had to be from God in order to perform these signs. Like, the miracles he performs are not natural. They are supernatural. They're not, he literally went against the laws of logic and nature. He went against all of the laws of this world, and he heals this man. Just like that. But that's the thing. If the Creator made us in his image, the Creator can also fix us. Kind of going a little bit off topic of what we're talking about, but God can fix us. But I want you to understand that when you come to Christ, you are not instantly healed. You are going to get a place in heaven. I'm not saying that you don't have salvation. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is a process of sanctification. Sanctification is you becoming more like Jesus, more holy every day, but we'll never be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. In this life anyway, there's no such thing as perfection. Because the moment you think that you have perfection, the moment when you mess up, you're going to be hopeless. We are called saints by God, not because of what we've done, but because of how God sees us. God sees us through Jesus. He doesn't see us as sinners when he looks at us through Jesus. But that doesn't mean we still fall short. We all still fall short. Hear me out. We all still fall short of the glory of God, as Romans 3:23 says. And anybody that would tell you that as soon as you accept Jesus, everything's going to be good, everything's going to be perfect, everything's going to be fine, it's a lie. Because I'm one step away from stupid from the rest of my life. Every day of my life, I'm I am trying to be more like Christ. I am trying to be more like him. But there are days I fail. I get angry. I lose my temper. My pride builds up. I get jealous. I get envious. Dane, as a man trying to live for God, I have lustful intentions and I'm trying to... You see where I'm going with this? We are never going to be perfect on this side of heaven. We are only going to be perfect when we enter the gates of heaven, because that is where we're going to be loose of this body of death. As Paul would say, wretched I am, who will save me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through our Lord Jesus Christ. It's because of God that we're going to get to go to heaven. We didn't earn it on our own terms. He paid the price so we could get to heaven. That cross, that bloody cross, he shed that blood for you and me so we could be forgiven. And Jesus is God. And only God can perform these signs. Somebody perfect had to do these signs. Not saying that God can't work through broken people. He has multiple times. But never think that you are perfect. As my high school pastor said, we can't be sinless, but we can sin less. Anyway, back to the chapter. As we look at Jesus healing this man's blindness, and the Pharisees and this crowd's questioning. So let's continue in verses 18 to 23. The Jews did not believe that he, which is the man who was blind, he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son? Who do you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews have already agreed that if anyone should confess that Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So there's a little bit of a tension going on here. The parents are being brought in, and now the Jews are questioning the parents, saying, "Is this your son?" They said, "Yes." And they're like, "Was he born blind?" And they're like, "Yes, but we don't know why he was healed." I think it's kind of sad how the parents don't stand up for their son. It says that they feared that they'd be kicked out of synagogue. They feared the tradition and the religion rather than protecting their son, rather than standing for their son. One day when I am a parent, I would lay down my life for my kids when I have them. And to see that these parents are just saying, just ask him, basically trying to dip from the conversation because they don't want to be persecuted. It is really sad. If you're a parent that's hearing this, or you're wanting to be a parent, a future parent, if you are looking to be a parent or you already are a parent, are you going to stand up for your children rather than your tradition? These parents should stand up for their son. So to all the parents and all the future parents out there, do you care for your children more than your tradition? Or is your tradition and your religion over your children? Like, you're so attached to the rituals and the practices and making sure you do everything right just to push your children out of the way because they're doing something wrong. Well, Jesus calls us to love every single person in the image of God the way that they're created, because they're created in the image of God. To me, Jesus is not a religion, it's a relationship. Now, it is a religion, but Christianity is so much different than just a religion. It's a relationship. It's the only religion that allows us to, where God came down in human form to die for the sinners. We don't have to go to God. God came to us and wanted to have a relationship with us. That's the only religion that talks about that, where the God that we worship came down, died so he could save us all. And if he died to save us all, we should give up our lives for our children and not our traditions. So let's continue. Verses 24 I would say all the way to 34. This is going to be a long passage. For the second time, they called the man who had been born blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to be his disciples?" They reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are the disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." Let me repeat that. If this man was not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" And they cast him out. They basically are having this debate with this man. I think it's super funny how these religious leaders, I'm going to say these Jews, are trying to figure out why he still can see. And he says in verse 27, I've told you already, and you would not listen. Do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? He's like, bro, boys, look, I was blind and now I can see. And why do you keep asking me the same question? Do you want to be his disciples? Do you want to follow him? And they said that we are disciples of Moses. Moses is this high authority that they think, which Moses did write the Torah, 5 books of the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah. Moses is great. Okay, Moses was pretty awesome. But the thing is, he was also fallen. I wonder if they skipped over the part where God said to Moses, "Speak to the rock." This is after the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, because the children of Israel did not believe that God would bring them into the promised land when Joshua and Caleb and the 10 other spies came in. And the 10 spies said, "We can't go in. There's too many things. We can't take them." And only Joshua and Caleb. It's funny because Joshua and Caleb are the only ones named, and they believed. The Israelites are accepting the truth of the 10 spies, and now they have to wander the wilderness for 40 years, and now the next generation is complaining. They want water, and God speaks to Moses saying, "Moses, I want you to speak to the rock." Moses strikes the rock, not once, but twice. And God lets the water flow, and then he says, "Moses, because you have disobeyed me, you are not going to enter the promised land." At the end of Deuteronomy, it does talk about that God allows Moses to see the promised land from a distance, but he does not get to step foot in that land. Moses was great, but we completely keep forgetting that these amazing prophets, these amazing people in the Old Testament, these heroes, were all flawed. Moses, like I said, he struck the rock. He disobeyed God. David was amazing. I mean, he was going to be called a man after God's own heart, but he fell into sin with Bathsheba, putting Uriah, her husband, at the front of the battle line to be killed in order for David to have Bathsheba as his wife. And it's so funny how they think that they're disciples of Moses, and they are. Well, we're descendants of Abraham, but they're trying to say that Moses is higher than God, or only God is with Moses. Well, that's not true. I mean, this was written by men, but it was inspired by God. And if God inspired the Bible, can't he do something new? They literally go against him. They literally scream at his face like, "You teach us?" It's amazing how they don't know where this man comes from. And he says, yet this man has to come from God in order for him to do these signs. And then they kick him out of the synagogue, all because that they are looking at him as, "You are in utter sin. You were born in sin, and you teach us." There's the pride right there. There's the pride from the Pharisees, because they think that because they can teach God's word, they are perfect. Because they obey the law, they are better. Right there. They're better. The Pharisees think that they're better than every common person to man. So now let's continue. So he gets cast out. The blind man gets cast out. Let's read the last paragraph. Verses 35 all the way to 41. Jesus said that they had cast him out, and having found the man, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I might believe in him?" Jesus said, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." Ooh. And that's the end of the chapter. Right there. It kind of leaves on a cliffhanger right into John chapter 10. But let's break this down a little bit. Because after they kick him out of the synagogue, after he's no longer welcome there, it's interesting how the man comes up. Jesus finds him. Jesus finds the man that he healed. And he basically is having this conversation if he believes in him. And he says, "I do. You are the Lord." And he worships him. It says he worshipped him. And I think it's so interesting in verse 39. "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, but those who see may become blind." Those were the Pharisees. And the Pharisees literally come up and literally ask Jesus right there on the spot, "Wait, are we blind? Did you guys just hear what he just said? Did you guys just hear what he just said? He just called us blind." Yeah, that's what he said. Because he says this, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now you are saying that we see, your guilt remains." He came to help those who do not see, and those who see, blind. This world that calls us foolish. This world that calls us foolish because we follow this Jesus. You know, they say it like that. You follow Jesus? Those that want to discredit us, marginalize us because we follow Jesus, man, what a blessing that should be on our behalf. To be persecuted. Because Jesus even prays this prayer. I think it's in chapter 17, which I'm so excited to get into very soon. I know it's in Matthew 11, where Jesus is talking to the Father. "Father, I thank you that you have hidden these things that you have revealed to me, to the little children, and have hid them from the rich and wealthy and those that think that they're wise. You have revealed these things to the little children." Like a little kid going up to their mom and dad shouldn't be afraid to ask any questions, because they trust in who they're talking to. They don't need to worry. It's their mom or dad. And I wonder if we could have that childlike faith. I wonder if we could have that faith where we say, "Father, I need you. I need you." And we don't just talk to him when we need him. We talk to him as if we're talking to our parents, as we're talking to our friends, your best friend that you talk to all the time. What if you did that with God? And even more. What if we did that with God? We opened his word. And I'm speaking this on my behalf. What if we opened his word? What if we prayed as if we believed it? And even if it doesn't come, or we wait, we still praise God. And we say, "God, thank you for this day. Thank you for breath. Thank you for food. Thank you for allowing me to just live on this planet." So I want to ask, both as we end this off, are we blind to Jesus? Or do we see that he allowed us to see? We are the little children that God has revealed himself to. This is the end of episode 9 of our I Am series. I'm super duper excited to get into chapter 10, where we're going to be talking about the Good Shepherd. And you may never know. We might have a guest, we might not. So you better stay tuned. Be sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, click that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you don't miss the next upload. Or if you're listening on a streaming platform, be sure you follow us and give a rating, give a comment. Let us know how you think about this podcast, because your feedback helps us grow this podcast into something better for the kingdom of God. My name is Clarke from Gospel House Ministries. Thank you so much for watching or listening. My name is Clarke once again, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.